Think of a friend whose life is currently a mess. You probably know exactly what they need to do to fix it. The path forward is obvious to you, but when your own life hits a wall, that exact same clarity vanishes. You can untangle someone else's knot in seconds, yet you remain completely immobilized by your own. This is not just a temporary lapse in judgment or a quirk of your personality. It is a measurable cognitive paradox that wrecks relationships and quietly sabotages the biggest decisions of your life. The reason you can give brilliant, life-altering advice to a stranger, but make terrible, self-destructive decisions yourself, is not because you lack discipline. It is because you harbor a fundamental misunderstanding of what the human brain was actually built to do. Because the reason you make terrible, self-destructive decisions yourself reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of what the human brain was actually built to do. The story goes that 3,000 years ago, King Solomon was the wisest man on earth. People traveled across continents just to hear him resolve disputes. In the most famous religious narrative, he judges a dispute between two women claiming the same baby with terrifying, perfect clarity. He was the ultimate arbiter of other people's problems. But in his own life, the legendary narrative tells a very different story. The texts say he hoarded 700 wives and 300 concubines. He could see the truth for everyone except himself, and the narrative ends with the kingdom splitting apart within a generation of his death. For 3,000 years, that asymmetry looked like a tragic personal failing. Then, two psychologists decided to measure it. This asymmetry is so reliable that psychologists Grossmann and Kross named it Solomon's paradox. In 2014, they tested this phenomenon across 3 experiments involving 693 people. They asked people to reason through a relationship conflict, framed either as a friend's problem or as their own. The results were stark. When looking at a friend's problem, people displayed high levels of wise reasoning. They recognized the limits of their own knowledge. They saw room for compromise. They considered multiple perspectives. But when looking at their own identical problem, that wisdom collapsed. And this is not a fluke of one study. A 2023 meta-analysis of nearly 5,000 people found a very real, albeit modest, effect across the board. We are consistently worse at solving our own problems. And perhaps the most unsettling finding from the original researchers was that age does not fix it. You might assume that a lifetime of making mistakes would eventually teach you how to navigate your own life. It does not. In their studies, 60 to 80-year-olds showed the same blindness as 20 to 40-year-olds. Experience does not cure Solomon's paradox. Therefore, we naturally assume that intelligence must be the shield. If you are smart enough, you should be able to outthink your own bias. But cognitive scientist Keith Stanovich spent decades proving that this too is an illusion. He coined the term Dysrationalia to describe the inability to think rationally despite having adequate intelligence. Being smart does not protect you. In fact, the history of science is littered with towering intellects who harbored bizarre, irrational beliefs the moment they stepped outside their specific domain. Consider Kary Mullis. In 1993, he won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for inventing the polymerase chain reaction. It is a towering feat of logic and molecular biology that revolutionized modern medicine. But Mullis also vehemently denied that HIV causes AIDS. He championed astrology. He even wrote in his memoir about a night he encountered a glowing, talking raccoon in the woods. His genius in chemistry offered absolutely zero protection against profound irrationality in his personal life. The bias blind spot is a documented, replicable phenomenon. We can easily spot the logical fallacies in other people's arguments, but we are entirely blind to those exact same fallacies in our own thinking. And the most alarming part of Stanovich's work is the scaling arm. Some research even suggests this blind spot gets worse with higher cognitive ability, though other studies contest the scaling. What nobody disputes is the blind spot itself. Raw processing power is not the cure. A high IQ does not make you less biased. It simply makes you better at constructing elaborate, sophisticated defenses for the terrible decisions you have already made. You use your intelligence as a lawyer to defend your ego, rather than as a judge to find the truth. Which brings us to the most uncomfortable question of all. If age cannot fix this, and intelligence cannot fix this, why is our hardware so deeply flawed? The reason we cannot solve our own problems is that we fundamentally misunderstand what reasoning is for. We like to believe that the human brain evolved to be a solitary truth-seeking machine. We picture the mind as a lonely scientist looking through a telescope, carefully weighing evidence to arrive at an objective reality. But one influential theory, proposed by Hugo Mercier and Dan Sperber, suggests that human reasoning did not evolve to help us find the objective truth at all. It evolved for producing and evaluating arguments in social contexts, to persuade others, and to judge their attempts to persuade you. In their framework, the argumentative theory of reasoning, the mind is not a scientist. It is a lawyer. In the small social world our minds grew up in, survival meant persuading others to share resources, follow your plans, and take your side. In that world, confirmation bias is not a glitch in the system. It is a highly effective feature. If your goal is to persuade, you do not want a brain that carefully considers the opposing side's valid points. You want a brain that aggressively gathers evidence to support your own position, while ruthlessly tearing down your opponent's claims. This explains why we are so brilliant at solving other people's problems. When we look at a friend's life, our internal lawyer is not on the defensive. We can evaluate their situation with cold, objective clarity. But the moment the problem is our own, the lawyer goes to work defending our ego. But if reasoning is really built for arguing, it should improve the moment an argument starts. And it does. In a landmark 1998 demonstration using a classic logic puzzle called the Wason selection task, individuals taking the test alone got the answer right about 9% of the time. But when people tackled the same puzzle in small groups, arguing it out, the success rate rocketed to roughly 75%. We are terrible at reasoning alone, but we are brilliant at evaluating the arguments of others. If our brains are literally built to evaluate other people's arguments rather than our own, how do we ever escape the trap? How do we fix our own lives when the hardware is actively working against us? We have to trick the brain into thinking we are someone else. In the summer of 2010, basketball star LeBron James made his infamous television broadcast to announce he was leaving his hometown team. During the interview, he repeatedly spoke about himself in the third person. He told the world he wanted to do what was best for LeBron James. The press mercilessly mocked him for it. They called it the ultimate display of arrogance, a symptom of an unchecked ego, completely detached from reality. But years later, Ethan Kross looked at that exact same interview and reframed it entirely. Under immense crushing national pressure, LeBron James was not being arrogant. He was spontaneously using a cognitive hack called self-distancing. This is a technique researchers have studied extensively. The original researchers found that simply shifting your internal monologue from the first person to the third person creates enough psychological distance to bypass your own bias. Instead of asking yourself, "Why am I doing this?" you ask the same question using your own name. Why is she doing this? Why is he doing this? When you use your own name, you force your brain to step outside of its defensive posture. You stop being the lawyer defending the ego, and you become the objective observer evaluating a stranger. You trick your mind into treating your own life like a friend's problem. By changing a single pronoun, you lower the emotional temperature of the decision, and suddenly, the brilliant advice you so easily hand out to everyone else becomes available to you. We decode the psychological mechanisms that actually run your life here every week. If you want to stop fighting your own brain and start using its quirks to your advantage, subscribe to Everywhy. But before you start talking to yourself in the third person, we need to look at what this paradox actually means for us. Because this blind spot is not just a trick of the mind, it is the foundation of human society. We spend our entire lives treating Solomon's paradox as a bug in the human operating system. But imagine for a moment what would happen if you were perfectly capable of solving all of your own problems in total isolation. If your brain was a flawless, objective, truth-seeking machine, you would never need to ask anyone for help. You would never need to seek out a second opinion. You would never need to collaborate or compromise or lean on the wisdom of the people around you. The fact that you give better advice than you take is not a cognitive failure. It is the exact mechanism that forces us to rely on each other. We are blind to ourselves so that we have to look at one another. Your mind was never designed to survive alone in the dark. It was designed to be part of a network, trading the clarity you have about someone else's life for the clarity they have about yours.